that we're bringing into savings. And again, get very excited if you have 1 or 2 paychecks where you're starting to see that you're able to move some of that money towards savings, because that's validating your budget, that your budget's working, and you want to continue to do that. Because when you fill your second bucket, the savings bucket, that's when we really start to look at retirement options. Maybe your employer offers a 401k. Maybe you start to set some money into savings that at the end of the year, you're going to put into a Roth IRA or something like that. These are all options that start to be at your disposal as you are able to fund those buckets. And then eventually we look at investment accounts, and these are called non-qualified or taxable accounts. And these, as we talked about in last class, the qualified or the Roth IRAs, those grow without any drag. We use the car analogy. Those grow without taxes, provided that they're in an investment that is growing. Those grow, there's no taxes, and then you start to make money on the growth, which is compounding, okay? So once we get past that, that's when we start to look at more risky investments way down the road, right? We're building out our infrastructure. We're building out all of our buckets before we would ever consider real estate, big real estate investment or something like that, right? We want to get our investment lives and the infrastructure built out before we would go down that road. So let's talk just really quickly about, and I do this as a summary chart because I don't want to make it more complex, and I'll send this graph around to Mackenzie. But just realize that if you are putting money into a qualified account, even a little bit of money. So if we get good at saving some money, and we're able maybe to set a goal of I want to put $100 into a Roth IRA, even $100, and I can set that into something to kind of set it and forget it. Maybe it's and we're going to talk about these. Maybe it's an index fund that manages based on when you think you're going to retire. So you might say, I think I'm going to retire when I'm 70. And if you're 35 years old, that's 35 years from now. And you would set that fund. And then that fund would manage that money as if you were going to need it when you were 70. So in this case, if you just were able to put some money in there every year, it's all managed and diversified and all that for you. And you're just having those returns compound. And so the goal is, no matter how small the money, that we're contributing regularly. So you get set up, maybe you're contributing to a Roth IRA quarterly. But again, I want everybody to remember that it's most important that we get some breathing room. For a lot of you who are living paycheck to paycheck or coming out of a situation where you're revisiting your financial lives and saying, okay, I got to get my arms around this. We don't want to rush, right? It's most important that each of you have some level of comfort with your situation, right? We don't want to be in the situation I was in that I was talking about, where I called my mom and we went through that. We all are going to have those moments. So first and foremost, we want to get a job. We want to start to have some income coming in. We want to get a sense of how much we're spending. And then we're going to want to hone in on that number so that that income is above the expense. And then that delta starts to feed our buckets, okay? And then great things happen, right? You don't just stay put. As time goes by, you get a little raise, okay? You get a little raise. You start to look at your expenses. Maybe you've got some bad debt. Suddenly your payment on that debt goes down, right? We're all about income going up and multiple sources of income. We talked about passive income, and in this case, a Roth IRA and some of these that you're seeing on the screen are exactly that. Even if you're putting 50 bucks in, even if you're putting 100 bucks in, whatever it is, just let it grow, okay? Don't take it out. You've built your savings. You know, you're going to have emergency money as you need it, but that's what we want to do. So there's a couple of differences here that I think are just worth noting. Some of these are deferral of salary, eligible for deferral of salary. So the classic one is a 401k, right? You can elect to defer some salary into a 401k if your employer offers it. Remember the general rule on 401ks. If your employer is matching any amount that you're putting into that 401k account, it's almost always a good idea to do it. And the reason is, the only reason you wouldn't do it is if you're first getting on your feet and you need as much of that income as possible to come into the household. But if you can stomach whatever that percentage is of the salary deferral, it's like a raise, because they're not giving you the money unless you take that money and contribute it to a 401k. So if, for instance, you're allowed to contribute in a year, let's say $1,000 that they're willing to match, then they're putting $1,000 in your account that you otherwise would not have. So again, general rule of thumb, anytime that your employer is going to match anything going into a retirement account, you should contribute at least that amount, unless we're just getting back on our feet and we need as much income coming into the household as possible. In general, 401ks are the most common, and then IRAs are probably the second most common that people hear, and there's 4 types, both for small businesses, if you have a small business, or for individuals. And again, the most common is the Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA is, again, one of the most tax-efficient vehicles because you have tax-free distributions at the end of it. So not only does the money grow tax-free, but when you start to give it to yourself in retirement, it's not taxed. Whereas all the other forms of IRAs and qualified plans tax that money coming out. Now, relax. When you're at retirement age, the general idea is that you're not making as much money. So you'd be in the lowest federal tax bracket and the lowest state tax bracket because you really don't have any direct income. So that's the general idea. The idea is not to hit you up as soon as you get to retirement and try and tax you, okay? So keep that in mind. That's less of an issue unless you have a lot of money in there that you're distributing to yourself. And everybody in this class, we're hoping that you're going to have a lot of money in there because you're going to start putting away $1 here, $5 there, $10 there. Take it out of the jar, put it in your Roth IRA. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about financial math. And largely, I just want everybody, if you have a calculator, this is where you want to get the calculator out. Because what we want to start to look at is basic financial math. And it may surprise people that there's a pretty simple sequence to making good financial decisions. One, you have to look at your options and understand what the potential of an investment might be. And 2, you have to look at what people are charging you for your debt, right? So whether we're talking about trying to make more income, and remember, we want income going up, or whether we want to have a debt plan or move down our expenses, it's really important that we understand this basic financial math. So what I'm going to do is get my calculator out. Okay. And so over here we see that, you know, when we're looking, let's say we're looking at 2 investments and we have $1,000. One, they project the return to be 5%. If I want to know what $1,000 is going to return on 5%, I put the $1,000 into my calculator, I hit the times button, and then I put 0.05, and that is 5%. So anytime I'm putting a percentage in, and I just want to see, it's the simple math is the number invested, the asset, times 0.0 whatever. If it's 3%, it would be 0.03. If it's 8%, it would be 0.08. If it's a 10%, if they're projecting a 10% return, it would be 0.10. All we need to remember is that that period needs to be in there if it's less than 100% return. Okay? So if I look at 1,000 times 0.05 and I hit equals, that's $50. Okay? So, and if I wanted to calculate that same calculation, I've got $1,000, and I wanted to know how much am I going to have inclusive of the return, I would simply put a 1 in front of it, 1.05. Oop, I'm sorry. I need to back that out. I need to hit the times. Oop, I still got a 0 in there. Sorry, hold on. 1,000 times 1.05. That's $1,050, right? We knew that it was a $50 return, but we had $1,000 that we initially put in it. So that comes back $1,050. Now, let's say over the course of a year, I was able to put another $1,000 in that account. And now I've got $2,050. And I'm in that same investment times 1.05. I'm now at $2,152. And if I'm able to put another $1,000 in, oh, I've got to go back. Sorry about that. I'm not doing so hot tonight. 2152 plus another $1,000 that we've saved. So we're in year 3 now. And then times 1.05, right? We see that this number keeps rising incrementally. And that is an illustration of passive income, okay? And compounding returns that are happening over and over and over again. But what is needed for this? The first thing that's needed is we need to adopt the bucket strategy. We need to have a checking account. We need to sufficiently feel good about the money that we have in that checking account. We need then for that to move to savings, and we need to build a nest egg in our savings that makes us feel comfortable putting some money away in a qualified account. Because the big thing about a qualified account is there's a penalty if you try and take it out early. And the reason that there's a penalty if you try and take it out early is because they want to discourage you from taking it out early. They want you to be incentivized to leave it in there for as long as possible. So like all things in life, we're going to need to be thoughtful before we start contributing large sums of money to our retirement, right? We need to make sure that our other buckets are taken care of before we put a lot of money in an account that if we try and get it back out, we're going to have a penalty before we turn 65, okay? Or before the IRA before your age is enough that it exempts you from that penalty. And this happens a lot, particularly with people who have credit issues. They have a job for a little while. They're putting money away in their retirement account, their 401k. Suddenly they lose their job. Maybe they fall on some financial hardship and they go through their other assets. Then they got to go and they got to pull the money out of the 401k. And there's a penalty and there's all kinds of things. And it leads to discouragement, right? You don't feel like you want to go put money back in that thing when you get on your feet. But again, don't let a bad experience get you down. What we want to work on is lots of sources of passive income that are well managed. So once we've got our buckets in order and we've got some passive income here, we want to focus on getting that properly managed. So we're going to talk about investments later, but I want everybody to understand this math, right? Anytime that I've got a potential return, and again, I'm going to use a tougher number here. Let's say I have $1,874 and someone's telling me that they think it's going to be an 8% annualized return. I'm going to times 1.08. And that means that they expect at the end of the year that I could have $2,023 in that account. Okay. So just everybody for my sanity, please write down that formula. Okay. It's the amount invested. So we'll just do another one, 1988, we'll call it, times, and if we want to find out what the return is by itself, we don't put a 1 in front of that period. So someone says, oh, it usually returns about 10%. Okay, times 0.10. That's the 10% equals 198.80. That's what we would, so anytime that we're looking at investments, it's not just the rate of return, right? But we want to be able to calculate the rate of return. So we want to at least be able to do the math to say, okay, if this returns 5%, here's what I'm looking at. If this returns 15%, here's what I'm looking at, okay? So we want to be able to understand how to do that income math. Same holds true as it relates to debt, okay? So if we have a flat interest rate on our debt, you know, let's say we have $3,300 in a student loan, and they're charging a low student loan rate on that of 2.5%. So if I look at that times 0.025, 2.5%, I'm paying $82.50 in interest. I'm paying $6.87 a month. And that's if they're not compounding that, okay? So you want to make sure that it's flat, or what the terms of that loan are. To give you an example of the challenges of credit cards, I've actually pulled up a website. And this is where, again, we talk about money working for you, and then we talk about your money working for somebody else. This is when your money works for somebody else. So let's say you have $3,500 on a credit card. And you can just go to a credit card interest calculator site right on your computer or on your smartphone, and you can pull this up. And here's your credit card minimum payment interest calculator. So this says, okay, we've got $3,500 in credit card debt. It's an APR, annual percentage rate, of 19%. They're asking you to pay a minimum. They say usually 2 or 3%. And let's say that it's 2.5%. We'll shoot the gap. And the minimum payment in this case is $87.50, which I calculated by taking that $3,500 and timesing it by that 2.5%. We just learned how to do that. That's a minimum payment of $87.50. But let's compute if we just paid the minimum payment. Okay, let's say we stopped using the card. Okay, we said, oh, it's too early for me to have a credit card, or I spent too much money, I don't trust myself, whatever. You cut the card up, but you continue to pay the minimum balance. Anybody have an idea of how painful this is going to be? Okay, we started out with $3,500. You're going to pay over $2,000 in interest. It's going to take you over 5 years, and you're 64 payments later of the minimum, you've paid them almost what you had charged on that card. Okay? So the problem, obviously, with credit cards, there's thousands of problems. There's thousands of problems. But the game can be won. And the game is won by thinking thoughtfully about your plan, doing your buckets, and when you're ready, because you've demonstrated the ability to be bringing in the money, you get a credit card. You may have to have it secured. We talked about that, where you actually are securing it with your own money. And then once you build up credit, you get a credit card. Then once you can actually start to get rewards, where again, when you're spending money, they're giving you cash back. I kind of view it as having a coupon everywhere you use the card. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting to get away from other people really enjoying that you have credit card debt, okay, and moving you towards a place where you're enjoying the fact that those same people are now paying you a percentage of every purchase that you run on the card. And obviously the key is that we pay off the balance every month, okay? And so in my financial life, I waited absolutely till I knew I had control. And I started, this is just my strategy. What I would do is start with a lower number than you're spending every month. So it may be that you've gotten really good at living on $2,000 or $2,500 a month. Okay. And you know that you don't overshop at the grocery store. So maybe that's the first place you use the credit card. Every time you go grocery shopping, you treat it just like you're paying cash or just like you're using your debit card, but you use your credit card. And you don't use it on anything else until you see, okay, I'm paying this off every month. I'm paying it off every month. Then maybe you move to paying for gas and groceries. And then maybe you move to having some of your bills be auto paid with the credit card. You know, I try and pay for big home improvements with credit card. You know, if they're not going to charge me anything for that, then I'm getting a discount. I'm getting a discount because I'm going to get that cash back. So as many of those expenses that we just are going to have, that's why we want to rush to get a credit card when we're ready. Okay, and flip the script. Start getting that cash back. But we don't want to overspend, and we want to be ready. We want to make sure that we're funding our buckets, that we're seeing the income come in, we're feeling comfortable with our expenses, we feel pretty good about our job, et cetera, et cetera. But this is something that you've really got to pay attention to, because credit cards will lure you in with all of these teasers, right? They'll tell you, hey, your first purchase, we're going to give you 30% off, right? You're sitting there and you got a $200 purchase or a $100 purchase, and you're thinking 30% off, that's $30. And $200, that's $60. You're thinking, this makes all the sense in the world. But the biggest mistake people make as they're getting credit is they take on too much credit too quickly. Okay? It's back to life. You know, sometimes we are overconfident in terms of what our abilities are going to be, and we run into a situation where suddenly we're pretty quickly overwhelmed. And anybody that's had credit card debt, they typically have more than one card, right? It started out as just one card, and then it became 3 or 4 cards, and the problem becomes that you have a minimum payment. And once you have 4 minimum payments, it makes it much more harder to pay down the principal that you've got on that card, right? And that's where the challenge comes in. Suddenly, your credit has taken over your life, you know, and you're trying to manage that. So what we do in those situations is we get all those cards, loans, whatever, into our financial statement, okay? And we get those in there, and I probably should just pull one of these up, but we get those in there and we put the interest rate associated with that loan. So I'm going to just, because, let me just see. Give me 1 second. I'm going to exit out of this. All right. Because I saw some people a little glassy-eyed around financial statements, I just want to pull up this. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. All right. So we're going to just fill one of these out. Okay. I'm going to call myself Johnny B. Good. Okay. And the date is 11/17/20. Okay. And I am going to say that
I can't see it, Rich.
You can't see it?
No, I can't see nothing.
You can't see anything, huh? Is everybody else seeing it?
I can see it, but it's a little small. If it's
Okay.
possible,
Same.
more.
So I'm Tydrika and I can't see anything either. I just see you all faces.
What are you guys on? Are you on Google Meet?
I'm
We should be
Say
on.
that
not
again.
sure. I'm on.
Y'all
I
can't see
just joined.
Rita's Excel sheets.
It looks like some
No.
people can and some people can't. It may be
All I
in your,
see is Greg, Jess, and Rich. That's all I can see.
Is there?
Okay,
an
so
option-
if you slide the screen over on your phone, then I can see it. Like, so I just swipe the page and then I'm able to see.
Perfect. Thank you, Tajika.
there we go. Thank you very much. Hopefully that allows you guys to see that.
Okay, I can see it now.
Okay, good. I just want to go through a very quick example. So let's say I have a Bank of America checking account. I know that Todd Walker is the guy in the bank that I talk to. And I know that right now I've got $1,895 in there. Okay. I've also got a Bank of America savings account. Okay. And I've started to put money in that. And I've got $4,523. And that is also Todd Walker, right? He's my banker. Then I go down to my taxable investments and I don't have any accounts yet. I have not yet built my buckets to a place where I have taxable investments. But I do work for XYZ company, and they have put me in a Fidelity 401k, and I am contributing, and I have been contributing to that for 2 years, and I'm only contributing a small amount of money, but it's roughly $850. I'm going to just do a quick formula. $850 times 2 times 1.10. So that is basically where my 401k is. But all I need to do, right, to do this exercise is just go to the bank, go to the online banking. Okay. Whatever the date is, and it's 11/17/20, I get the amount of the checking. I get the amount of savings. I might want to look real quick to see if I've got any pending bills that are going to be big. You know, if I got a car insurance bill or I've got something that's big, I may want to look at that just so I know. But I just put these amounts in. I don't have anything here yet. I have I'm going to blow this up a little bit so you guys can see it. That probably makes it a little bit easier for people on phones. Sorry about that. I wasn't thinking about that. I have this nice monitor here, and you guys are, some of you are working off phones. So there I am. I've got my Bank of America checking, Bank of America savings, and going to put in my okay, so that calculates my bank accounts. This is calculating my taxable, which I don't have any money in yet, but that's fine. I'm building it out. And then I've got my 401k money. Then let's say I live in a condo that I split with somebody. We have the mortgage. Both of us are on the lease, and we'll call this 415 Farrington Drive. Little 2-bedroom condo for me and my roommate. And the value of that real estate in that condo is $95,000. Okay. But we have a loan on it. Loan, let's just call it SunTrust loan on 415 Farrington Drive. And that loan, let's say, is 85% of the value Oh, bear with me. And you don't need to put in all these formulas, right? If you're not familiar with Excel, you just take out a piece of paper and you fill it out, okay? And then you save it for the next quarter and you do it. And these are all printable, and Mackenzie can get you copies of these, and obviously we can get these in front of you. So I know that I've got a loan of $80,750 on my share of the condo. So we're gonna just have all those numbers. So that's my loan. And then let's say I've got a car. I've got a 2007 Toyota Camry. And that Camry's value is, I bought it at CarMax. It's now worth about $8,700. That's a 13-year-old car. Maybe we call it. What I would do though in this instance is I would look up the Blue Book value, right? I can go online, I can look up the Blue Book value. Let's say that the car is worth $6,500. And let's say I have a loan on the car. Okay, so I have a Toyota or let's just say it's another bank. We'll go with, let's see, Ally Bank does a lot of car loans. Ally Bank loan on 2007 Camry, okay? And that is almost paid off. I'm down to the $1,625 on that. And now I show that as a negative number, okay? So I know that my mortgages and liabilities, I would add these up, are $82,000. I know that this asset is worth that much if I were to cash it in. And I know if I were to sell my house, and again, so there's some assumptions here, especially with real estate and cars, right? You don't have to update those every quarter. But if you're starting to think about selling your car, you may want to be looking at that Blue Book value. You may just want to kind of understand what is the value of this car? Is the loan on the car worth more than the car, right? We don't want to be in those situations and then be surprised when we go to sell the car. So here we've got it. So when I look at my total assets, I'm going to calculate these real quick. It's this number plus this number plus this number plus this number. And plus this number. Okay, so I see that I've got $109,000 worth of assets and $82,000 worth of debt. Okay, so my net worth is $27,413. Okay, so I realize that this example may be, I know a lot of you probably don't own real estate right now, so this may be, but I just wanted to throw in some things that we would put some debt on, like a car, okay? But this is a very simple thing that we need to do that starts to make us aware. So the other thing I might do on this loan is I'm going to put over here, this is what we talked about. SunTrust loan on 415 Farrington. I would say this is Jessica Tomlin. She's my contact at SunTrust, and the loan is 3%, 30-year fixed. Okay, and then Ally Bank, my representative is Deborah Watson, and that is a 6% loan. Okay, so we know that it's cheaper for us to get a loan on a home, and that is typically good debt to have, as long as you don't have too much of it. But that's good debt to have because you can write that down on your taxes. So the money that you pay in principal, a lot of people can get a tax exemption on that principal. So it reduces your overall taxable burden. And that was something that the government did to have people buying more houses and try and stimulate the economy. But as you can see, this is our statement. But if I have lots of debt, let's say I have a student loan, and this is with, I don't know, let's go Morgan Sachs. And let's say that that's a $800 student loan, and that is Tom McMillan, and that is a 2% low government loan. So I know that that $5,800 is, I'm pretty good on that. I don't need to worry about that. But then I've got a Citibank credit card. We had a good time, my buddies and I. We went out, we ate at a nice restaurant. We just went out and we did that for a few weeks. And so I ran that bill up to about $3,500. And then with interest, it's now sitting at $4,200. I haven't paid it. And it's a negative number, sorry. And then to make matters worse, when I started with it, it was a nice low 0% APR. They were really nice to me. They called me Mr. Harris. It was awesome. And now that has worn off. I don't even have a contact. It's just Citibank. And I know that there's a 19% APR on that card. Okay. So in this very hypothetical example, we know right now, just based on Johnny B. Good's situation, he's got some checking and he's got some savings, and that's really nice. He's got about $6,400 total in the bank. He's been putting money away, but he's let this credit card kind of go crazy. He's getting finance charges and he's getting interest charges, and it's starting to impact his credit. Okay. So what we need to start thinking about doing.
Hey!
Yes, Sheila.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I'm sorry.
You were ready to tell Johnny B. Good what he needs to do. We know that this is our priority, right? Because of this 19% interest rate, right? That's how we need to start to think. And that's why we did the math that we did, right? We need to know what these rates are. Okay, we need to know on that debt what those rates are, because I see people make debt mistakes, and I've seen them even in this class where people are looking at maybe the amount and assuming, you know what, I need to go after this big $5,800 amount. But we know we're getting that money at 2% interest, very small amount of interest, whereas the $4,200 balance that we have here is a 19% annual percentage rate, adding finance charges. And if I'm not paying, they're drilling me with everything that they can. Okay. So it's really important as you start looking at a debt plan, if you have multiple sources of debt, that you understand what these rates are and that you can do basic calculations to show what that cost of capital is costing you. Okay. And so as we go into making more investment decisions, as I start to say, okay, what do I do with this $4,500? Should I start to put that maybe in more in my 401k, or should I maybe start to look at an investment for it? If that equals 3 times of my take-home pay, well, I mean, really what it's telling me is that I need to start to aggressively pay down this debt. More than the minimum payment. I need to negotiate. I need to pick up the phone and say, hey, Citibank, you know, you wooed me in there. You were calling me Mr. Harris. It was so wonderful. Now I'm at a 19% APR. You guys are hitting me with a finance charge. I'm a student. I've got a student loan. You know, you tell the story, And then you get on a payment plan that is better than the 19%, right? And you don't miss any more payments, and we start to kind of aggressively pay that down. Now, we don't want to pay it down so much that we completely erode our savings, okay? We don't want to do that. We want to pay it down aggressively, but we still want to have our money, a little bit of money for breathing room, a nest egg, okay? All right. So that's as simple as it is. And for some of you, if you just have 1 or 2 accounts, great. But if you have some debt, let's make sure that we're putting in those interest rates, okay? Because that's going to start to just tell you what you need to do. You're going to know highest interest rate, biggest problem, right? Unless you're on some kind of plan where they're not charging you anything for a while. But even in those instances, it's good to be paying it down, right? But you always want to know, where is it costing, where does it cost me the most to have somebody else's capital, okay? And then on the flip side, when we're looking at investments, it's a little more complicated because we're trying to really understand duration of investment and other things, and what our goals are, what are we trying to achieve, when are we going to need the money back. All those things are going to be issues that you're going to look at on the investment. So, so when we just talk about basic vocabulary, I want everybody to understand that a return is the percentage or the money amount of the increase in value of an asset. And it can be negative too, right? We can have a negative investment, but that's called our return. We can have a negative return. Okay. And in the examples that we calculated out, we showed what the returns were. We didn't look at them on a percentage basis. We looked at them on a cash basis. And so we calculate an annual return of 6% by taking the original amount. We just did this. And then we times it by 0.06 to find out exactly what the extra money, the return was coming in. And then 1.06 to see the current value with the return. Very, very simple, but I suggest you write it down if you're not a math fan, and you've got it. And the same holds true for debt. Interest is money paid regularly at a particular rate for the use of the money lent, deposited, or for delaying the repayment of a debt over some period of time. So the important thing to know is that if you have debt, you're paying interest to somebody else. And if you have investments, they're paying interest to you. Okay?
I top up there. I some kind of way on.
I'm not sure who that was. I can't see anybody's mic being off. But anyway, so that's what we're dealing with in terms of returns and interest. We've talked about compound interest. This yellow line is compounding interest that assumes that you're saving 10% of your paycheck, which results in $3,000 a year in this example, and your passive income is growing at 5%, which is very conservative, and your direct income, your annual income is growing at 2.5%. You're 35 years old. We see that somewhere between year 10 and 11, your passive income, if you get on this savings plan, starts to produce more annually. The value is greater than your direct income. So this chart typically has people go, oh my gosh, you know, I need to find ways to have that money working for me. And this is one of the first thing I did for almost every young real estate professional that I hired. I showed them on a graph the importance of saving their money and investing their money and having those returns compound for them over time. So the earlier we start, the better. But for those of you with gray hair like me, you know, there's no time like the present. There's still time, right? We see that just in 10 years, you know, you can have a vastly different passive income situation. And the beauty of it is it never stops compounding on itself if it's well-managed money that you're adding to every year, right? You set up a situation where you start to have a substantial sum of money if you can leave it alone and let it continue to grow, and let what's growing continue to grow, and what's growing continue to grow, and what's growing continue to grow, right? That's compound returns. So very important to try and do that as early as possible. It's easily the number one mistake that most people make in their savings and passive income side of their financial lives. Most people don't start until they're much older. Some people mature later. Some people don't see the need for it. But ultimately, I've met a lot of people who wish that they started earlier. And you particularly wish that you start earlier after you start successfully saving, right? Because you start to see the value. You start to see the affirmation of those investments and of the money growing and contributing to your financial lives. All right. So when we look at the financial decisions, we need to take into account the interest paid or the received savings with the projected returns on an investment opportunity. So this is where we start to pick and choose between, should I pay down this debt? Should I put some money in this investment? And you've heard people use the word the spread, right? If I have one loan that I'm paying at 5% and another loan that I'm paying at 12%, I've got a 7-point spread, 7 percentage points or 700 basis points. Okay, I have a spread there. I need to take care of the 12% loan before the 5% loan, unless there's other payment things that I got to worry about. Same thing holds true with an investment. If I've got a little bit of debt and I'm looking at an investment, I then have to decide, do I want to put this in an investment where it can make 7%, or should I pay down the higher interest rate credit card debt? And obviously every situation is different, but in most instances, you don't want to be investing money until you have paid down nearly all of your high interest debt. Okay? General rule of thumb. And that's what we're going to compare. So let's just use a couple of examples here. So let's say Kendra has a paycheck of $1,200 every 2 weeks, or $2,400 a month. She has $24,000 saved because she's been saving like a mad woman. $24,000 saved between her checking and savings, and she has already put $3,000 away for her Roth IRA for the current year. So she's been contributing each paycheck. She is opening an investment account with her bank and met with her advisor about potential investments. She has debt from an old credit card that has since been turned off in the amount of $7,200. She pays the minimum payment on the debt each month, which we just did that calculation. We know that's really hurting Kendra. The interest rate is 12% per annum. The advisor has shown her several investments that have projected returns of between 5 and 10%. Who wants to tell me what Kendra should do? Go ahead and unmute yourself if somebody's answering. I can't. Anybody that wants to answer this question should go ahead and unmute themselves and give Kendra some advice.
I think I saw Casey speaking, but I could be wrong.
Well, I was reading it over again because I remember you just said, Rich, which just gave me a black eye. If you've got, you said like the last slide, you said debt and investment. If you have a lot of debt, you don't want to aggressively, did I understand you to say that you don't want to aggressively make investments or start to build those buckets over there because you got the debt, you got the monkey on your back, right?
That's right.
So for Kendra.
Yep. It's like building a deck on the back of your house while the front of your house is on fire. Right? That's the analogy.
Right.
Okay. So for Kendra, she could make between 5 and 10%. Okay. And we can do the math on that, right? Mm-hmm. On that investment. And it's going to pale in comparison to the fire that is going through her living room right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to understand those interest rates. So what is the monthly amount of interest on the debt she is paying? We can figure that out. We can do that math. We can $7,200 times 0.12 divided by 12 is going to give us that monthly payment, provided there aren't finance charges or there aren't other associated penalties on that card. And more than often than not, there are, right? They don't make it easy to calculate because why? They don't want you to calculate it. They know that if you calculate it, and that's why in Congress, they actually passed a law that's now requires credit card companies to put what you will pay and how long you will be paying if you choose only to pay the minimum payment. Because people realized all of a sudden, oh my gosh, if I pay this minimum payment, I'm going to pay like 80% of what I spent in addition to paying them back for that. Right. I mean, if I came up to any of you and said, hey, look, I'll give you $500, but I'm going to expect $500. I'm going to expect you to pay me the original $500. And then I'm also going to expect you to pay me another $400, in a short period of time. You're saying to yourself, wait a second, that's not a good financial decision. And credit cards are a bad place to go for money when we need money. Sometimes it's the only place, but we know that if in that moment we're going to succumb to the credit, it's going to make our life a lot harder down the road as we're trying to dig out. So the answer for Kendra is that, first of all, gold star sticker for the savings that she's been able to put away. I think it's fantastic that she's got a Roth IRA that she's contributing to, but she's now at a place financially where if something goes bump in the night, she's got that nest egg. She's got enough money that she's not going to be losing sleep or be worried about her kids or something like that. She now needs to attack that debt. And she wants to call that company and she wants to say, hey, I will make aggressive payments on this debt if you reduce my interest rate to say 7%. I promise I'm going to start paying this back. Now she knows she's got some money there. So, she got $24,000. She could pay it all off. I wouldn't recommend that necessarily. Maybe if she felt really good about her job. But I'd start to aggressively pay that off, and I would work and negotiate with that credit card company to ensure that they were going to give me something better if I were going to do that. Because most of them, especially if you haven't been paying, they're going to be pretty aggressive, right? They're going to say, oh, wait a second, Casey, you're calling me on this loan? Oh, I see that you haven't made a payment on this for some time. Okay, well, we'll lower your payment, but we need you to, if you are willing to triple what you're paying us, and maybe in Kendra's situation, she has that money, that's a good move.
Rich, a quick question. Good. Well, a quick question. What are your feelings on? And certainly, you're right. We can't call the banks and the credit card companies and let them know that we're trying to do this and the other to negotiate. Yep. What are your feelings on these credit counseling services? Because they add that on the statement as well. I've never called because I don't know if it's all, I believe it's all legit. I don't know.
Yeah. And this is where it's just really important, if you don't feel comfortable, to be getting all the information and then working through that. You can always call me. I'll make the time. I'll work through whatever somebody's presenting you. And again, for your plan, you'll need to decide, but we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Credit counseling in many respects, the game is, as we talked about, it's kind of like, we'll use the analogy again of a fire. If you've got a fire in your living room, that's one credit card. Okay. We can walk over there and take a blanket and we can probably get that out over time. But if we have 3 credit cards or 4 credit cards, we start to have multiple fires that we're trying to put out. And we all know that if you have multiple fires that you're trying to put out, there's a limited amount of time before the fire can kind of overcome you. And that's what it does to your monthly household finances because you have multiple minimum payments, right? So you went from feeling like you were in a great position because you had one minimum payment. Suddenly you've got two. Before you know it, you've got four, and you're only able to pay those minimum balances. That's where they've got you, right? They've got you at that point because they are just going to be living off that interest, you know, all the investors in whatever credit vehicle that is, right? So what credit services do is they tend to consolidate all that debt. And credit counseling is different than that. So credit counseling may be good. They just want you to figure out, those are people that are designed to help you kind of figure out your debt. But those consolidation credit companies, you know, the problem is you've got to have learned your lesson, right? If you consolidate all that debt and you have a lower payment, you've got to know what those interest rates are. You got to know what the teaser rates are. It's the same thing as a credit card. If you had $2,000 on 4 cards, suddenly it's $8,000 on one debt payment. And yet it feels better because your minimum payment goes down. You don't have 4 of them, but it still puts all that in one place and can put you in a situation where your interest rate is higher. So this is exactly the purpose of this class, right? The purpose of this class is for us to understand what those rates are that people are charging us and understand all of our options. And again, I've told everybody in class, you've got to be your biggest advocate. Even if it's uncomfortable, you need to call them. You need to tell them your story. Hey, here's what's happened to me. I went through a divorce, or I had my parent died, or I fell on hard times, or whatever it is. And then explain how what you've done to turn your life around. I'm currently in Step Up. I've got a job. I've been gainfully employed now for 3 months, or whatever it is. You got to tell them the story, and they want to help you, but they need to hear that story. And then you need to say, here's what you could do for me. You know, if you could, move my interest rate down, if you could do this, if you could do that, and then you need to promise them something. 1, I'm going to pay it off, or 2, I'm going to be a lifelong customer if you can help me through this, and here's what I think is reasonable, and go through it with them. And then they're going to tell you, well, maybe if you could do this, or maybe you could do that. It's a negotiation. Okay. So, are we out of time, Mackenzie?
Kind of, but if anyone has like a last minute burning question, feel free to ask.
Okay. I am going to send around this last example with Darren, and I'd really like people to read it and get a sense of what they think is going on there. So Mackenzie, I'll include this in the resources for class. But please get those financial statements together. You see that it's pretty easy based on what we just did, and work through it with your co-partner. Let the facts jump off that sheet in terms of what you need to do in your financial lives.
Yeah, that's great. Also, Rich, if you want to send it to me right now, I can send it to co-partners.
Okay.
We can discuss it in co-partner time if you think that'd be helpful.
I can do it.
Cool. And then just a reminder to everyone, be using your resources. Talk to your co-partner. Set up a time with Rich to talk one-on-one. Set up a time with the guy who came last week, Ian Bloom. Use your resources. And I will send out Rich's email and Ian Bloom's email and the recap email tomorrow as well, so that you can be reaching out to them.
Hopefully people are enjoying the recaps. There's a lot of resources there.
There's
And
so
if nothing
much.
else, put them somewhere where you can look at it when you're in that situation. That's, build yourself a little file of financial, all the things that you're learning and put them there so that you can grab them when you need them.
Yeah, I've been making actually a resource tab with each week that I'll send out at the end of the phase. So if you miss one recap week, you'll have it all there come December 8th.
And the final thing too, if you've got my email and something's not making sense to you and maybe you didn't feel like raising your hand, with the group, don't be afraid to just reach out, shoot me a note. Don't be afraid to reach out and shoot me a note and say, boy, that was really boring last night, or I really liked this part about it. I'm more than happy to take the feedback and have interaction with all of you. That's what we're here to do. And again, I apologize for COVID, because otherwise I'd really enjoy being around all of you for an extended period of time.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Rich. Have a great night. Everyone else, I'll see you back in the main
Thank
room.
you.
Co-partners, check your emails.
All right, Mackenzie, take care.
Thank you.
Fod, stay around for
Mhm.
co-partner time. Remember, we're going straight
Okay.
co-partner
All right.
time.
Glad you reminded me.
Yeah.
Hey, oh,